how can it be used by local businesses, SMEs, individuals, educational systems? Perhaps we can start with the business side. How can businesses really activate and use the hyperlocalism to their advantage?
Well, the thing about local businesses is they have to demonstrate quality, don't they? They have to demonstrate that they've got a value and a worth above what you can get from Amazon. Because if I go on Amazon today, in the UK, the distribution network is so good, I can get virtually anything the very next day, and in some cases the same day, delivered. You know, they've sorted the logistics out amazingly. So I can just browse, you know, when I'm having a cup of tea, and just buy something, and it comes, and the price is usually okay. You know, sometimes you pay a little bit more, but more often than not, it's a market price. So when I look at a local store, a furniture store or a craftsman maybe, or somebody, you know, and I say, well, why is that £500 more expensive than this? Or why is it £30 more expensive than that? Well, of course, they've got physical costs and they don't have economies of scale. But that doesn't matter when you're emptying the wallet. You know, it matters when you're setting the business up, but to ordinary people, it doesn't matter. And I think what hyperlocalism offers, and I'm starting to see it, I think, is that these local small businesses can start to build networks of people who support them and say, actually, go to him, he's much better value. If it doesn't work, he'll answer the phone and, you know, and come back and fix it. And it's those added value things and the extra worth things that I think the online giants will never sort out. They can't. I mean, Amazon write things off. If they send you something and it's wrong, they, you know, if it's small, they just say don't bother sending it back. Yeah. They just write it off. It's just not worth it. Whereas, you know, you maybe, and I think this is the thing, maybe it will push us back away from that sort of ultra mass production mentality where the more you produce, the cheaper it can get, to saying, well, is it worth more if we can fix it rather than throwing it away? It may get rid of the disposability. And I've seen a number of articles where people are starting to agitate to make companies like Apple make their phones repairable.
Yeah.
Now, with phones is a really interesting point. One of the things I hate most about Apple is that they have the Apple shops and the centers where you go if things go wrong.
Yeah.
You can't just take it to your local shop and fix it.
Yeah.
The local shops, you know, they can in some cases, but they make it difficult. Whereas actually, you know, if you go to eBay, you can buy the component parts for the phone, and if you're at all capable, you can actually pull it apart. But to stop that, what they've started doing is gluing things in place. So if you try to take them out, they break.
Yeah.
And this is where I think, you know, hyperlocalism starts to work commercially, because if you find someone who can deal with things for you and it costs you $100, it's a lot less than $1,200 at the Apple store.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you will never get anything cheap at an Apple store with the you know, from the geniuses. That's just not what Apple do. They've never put anything cheap out in their life. You know, every product has been premium. Whereas, you know, you can take an Android phone along to a local shop. They can just fix it for you. It's $70 for a repair, and you've got the phone working again for another 2 years. Interesting, my local tech shed, which is a little store next to my local railway station that fixes technology for you, computers, etc. They're in the same position with Samsung. They won't repair Samsung stuff because Samsung throttle the parts, the supply of parts to them. And it's that sort of thing, I think, that localism can start to upend and change, because actually localism can tell you that somebody very local to you can repair that for you. Whereas before you were just on the phone to an Apple store ringing up, and you have to go 20 miles to the nearest Apple store if you're lucky, because they're not on your local high street. You know, if they were, great, but they're not. So I think that is economically is one thing where hyperlocalism will change. It's that availability of knowledge and the sharing of knowledge. And in Britain, that's kind of replacing the pub, because that's where you would go to find out anything local. You'd go to your local pub and you'd talk to someone. Does anybody know anybody around here who can fix this?
Yeah.
And they'd say, oh yeah, somebody can. You know, and which in turn stood in place of the networks at work. When they all worked in the local coal mine, they could talk to people there in the same way, but we've fragmented so much that those networks aren't there anymore. Hyperlocalism is the reinstallation of those networks.
So basically, you don't need to get drunk to get the information.
Well, you can if you want. Some people don't like to drink, some do.
You've got the choice.
Yeah, no, but you've got the choice, and I think we're doing the hyperlocalism thing actually a lot more. The more since we talked about this, and I said I'd come on and do this this session with you, I've been thinking a lot more about it, and you know, I've been thinking about it in the context, for instance, of the rail work I do. So I've taken this job in the railway company. Now that railway company runs a railway line and services that link London, York, Newcastle, Edinburgh, Aberdeen, and Inverness. So they're all major sort of British centres, you know, and we also link up to allow people to get to Cambridge. So if they're going to the university, we get a lot of students. Durham as well, which is one of our top universities, is on the line. So we get a lot of, but there are lots of gaps between the train stations because they're running through rural areas on the East Coast. So, you know, the centres we go through are very historically very localized centres. So York is the ancient capital of England. It still has Roman walls. It has the biggest Gothic cathedral in Europe. It has Tudor streets, you know, the white and black beams, buildings you see in historical English dramas. And it has all that sort of architecture and infrastructure. It's a very old town. It's a very wealthy town. And, you know, and there are lots of those towns up there. And one of the things the company does is actually try and feed into localities. So, for instance, all our food on the trains is local to some kind of to one of the areas going up. So you get Scottish food, you get, you know, northern traditional Scottish food, you get, you know, southern Scottish, you get northern English food, etc. The suppliers that are all local suppliers. And I think that's an interesting case where a business has actually realized that hyperlocalism actually, even though we're spanning a country, can actually be beneficial, because we can say, well, we do employ local food people, you know, to produce stuff for our trains, and we do put regional delicacies on the menu. And when I say delicacies, you know, I don't mean high cuisine. I mean, you know, local dishes, and so on. And I think what's quite interesting is working in a company that actually pays attention to that and does that is quite something. And what you get off the back of that are communities online that do talk about us and that are related to the, you know, to the areas that we're passing through, and that sort of still regard that. And of course you get train nuts, you know, because people are really enthusiastic about trains. But the locality matters to the business, because actually, you know, okay, you know, I work in London. I've got head office in London, not head office, but the office I use is in London, and we have one of the main terminals in London. But actually, probably most of the customers we have are between what we would call regional cities, all up that East Coast. And so actually, you know, a lot of those people using our trains never go to London. So why would we communicate anything about London to them particularly? And I think there's an opportunity for lots more businesses, and I think small businesses are jumping on that and saying, actually, this Facebook group allows me to tell people I exist, or to remind them I exist. It's so easy to go to Amazon and buy something that you forget there are shops. You forget there are local tradesmen. You know, you do the same now automatically with garages. You know, our cars have to have an annual roadworthiness test by the government. So you have, every year you have to have a license to go on the road again. And of course, that's a big money spinner for local repair shops and garages and what have you, because they perform this government check for you, charge you for the performance, take a bit of the money, and then you can't drive the car if it fails. So they end up having to repair it. And they get that work. So lots of garages do that. But of course, some people are less honest than others. It's now really easy to find out who's honest and who isn't, and who will actually do the assessment fairly and properly, and won't try and tell you that things need doing when they don't need doing, you know, which is the car repair shop thing all over the world, isn't it? Ooh, I think, yeah, this could do with fixing, you know.
To cost you.
But I think hyperlocalism as a high concept was around in the 90s, but I think it's actually happening now and nobody's picked it up. I mean, I wish I could find the article from India, because it was fascinating, talking about how local produce in India is starting to use this technology, and they're starting to use it to both organize and to tell people they're there. And if you think about it, if they're organizing, this is what happened with the fruit farmers, the orange farmers in Florida. They all got together and they agreed to work together, and they agreed to put all their orange juice in, share the profits, etc., etc. And they created a brand, Tropicana, to sell Florida orange juice. So that brand is, although it is a corporation, it is a corporation owned by, or set up by, all the orange juice farmers, and the brand was just created, and that's the brand that they trade through with the rest of the world. And I think what's happening is there are opportunities for businesses to start doing that now, forming virtual corporations, if you like, to, you know, in order to provide economies of scale. And similarly, then, of course, that moves on to activism, doesn't it? We mentioned Brexit. There's the activism side of it. People have latched onto the internet very quickly for activism. And while they were, I think, initially seen as, oh yeah, internet social justice warriors, there are now many, many more what you might call standard middle class people who are also using the internet to organize, to effect change. And whereas I think 15 years ago, those people found people who agreed with them and got together in communities of interest, I think now it's local issues. And I think they're refixing the geography back into it. I hope so.
I've seen that sort of shift.